Hey everybody, you're watching the Mike Nelson Show. I want to thank everybody who's already subscribed to the channel around the world. It's really greatly appreciated. Today, I got two very special guests. I got Fritz and JoJo from the band Wonderful Bluffer. How you doing today, guys?
Doing well.
Doing
Thanks for
good.
having us.
Doing good. These guys are, coming all the way out from Milwaukee. You guys are out in Milwaukee, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, to start off the interview, if you could give your name and your instrument, that way our radio listeners can know what you're listening to.
Yep. I'll go first. My name's Fritz. Full name Christian Fritz Klaus, but everyone calls me by my last name. And I play the vocals.
What's up, guys? My name is JoJo Scott. I play guitar, electric guitar, shredding. It's a good time.
Cool. So when did the band start out? When did Wonderful Bluffer, start out? What's the story behind that? Maybe what year? And tell me the story of how this whole group kicked off.
Yeah, so our first gig was technically October of 2018, but the band got together, I believe the spring or fall of that, just through like happenings. You know how things just kind of happen. So I was a teaching assistant at UWM for like the beginning guitar class and stuff like that. So I would go in, I think like on Tuesday afternoons or some weekday afternoon just to assist the main lady. Her name was Beverly Belford. And fun fact about her, her son wrote the music for SpongeBob, which I found out, and that was hilarious. But I was just warming up one day, this, before the lesson started. Students are filing in, and met this guy, Anthony Powles, who was like in the class, but he kind of already knew how to play guitar, and he told me he drummed. So we were like, all right, cool. We like some of the same music. We'll get together. There's a guy who lived in his dorm, who's our current bass player, Adam Rimkus. And so the three of us just kind of got together, and I had like one or two songs written. We had gotten asked to do a gig, and I was like, sure, I'll put together a little band. Um, and so we didn't really have like a permanent singer or nothing like that for the first show. Our buddy Logan Ferruta, who plays in a band called Modern Joey, helped out on that first gig. It was like a Halloween show. So it was like a two guitar kind of thing with bass and drums. Um, After that, we found another member to kind of take over full singing duties, Madeline. Um, and after that, we did some good gigs and stuff like that until we kind of found Fritz and decided we wanted like a more like, powerful vocal to kind of lead the group. And then Anthony, our original drummer, moved to Chicago, and we got Ryan Zebarf, who is our current drummer, who actually sang for the band during like the interim period where we are looking for like a new vocalist. So it was a lot of lineup changes in those early years, and then we settled on the final lineup.
Now, can you explain to our listeners? You guys are a six-piece band. What instruments do you guys have in the band, and why is it a six-piece band?
So we've got let's see, electric guitar, tenor saxophone, um, bass guitar, keys slash keytar, vocals, and drums. And it just kind of worked out that way. I should have mentioned Julia Lewandowski, who plays the tenor saxophone. She also plays the flute and sings and even plays guitar on a song or two sometimes. She's one of my best friends and one of the first people I actually met down here in Milwaukee. And she was sort of a part of like that early rendition as well, until she started doing it kind of more full time. The six-piece sound just kind of, it's full. And the guitar, you kind of get that full sound that you would kind of need with like a two guitar band. But since there wasn't another guitarist in the band, it just kind of worked out. And it wasn't always a six piece. Will, our keyboard player, he joined um like a few years after the band was already formed. We actually met him at a house show that we were doing, and he's just so good. I was like, we got to have this guy in the band eventually. You know what I mean? He's like a wizard. So it just kind of happened. Initially, it was just guitar, tenor sax, um, bass, vocals, and drums. Once we kind of got into like the more gigging lineup of the early years, after the initial kind of setup. And it's just awesome with that many instruments and with so many people who can like play lead and solo and sing. You just can write any kind of song you want. Like there's songs where like Julia solos and sings during the same song, or will just rip out the guitar for a massive like solo. I can do the solo stuff too. Even Adam, the bass player, can solo. And then these six people, like three people can sing lead if they so choose. You know what I mean? So everybody who has a song idea, because we're all kind of songwriters, basically gets to have their voice heard, and the sound is just covers all the bases.
Now, talking about the sound, how do you think you guys developed that sound to where it is today? You guys have a very unique sound, I would say. Listen to the record, and how did you get to that?
Um, Sort of just happened once again. Like we all have very, I'm not gonna say very different. We all have like interests and like musical interests that lie within the same kind of bubble, but then each individual person kind of has like another bubble where it stretches more into, and all of that kind of combines into what you hear on the record and what you hear like at the live shows. You know what I mean? I like the blues and 70s rock and roll stuff. Will does a lot of like video game music and anime music, like synthesizer stuff. Fritz is really into like the 90s and the grunge. RJ's got the singer songwriter kind of thing that goes a bit more intricately into the realm of like classic rock and folk and stuff like that. Julia's got the classical and jazz background. Adam's got the heavy metal and all that sort of stuff. And then we all kind of meet in the Venn diagram that is like classic rock. And we just really respect the songwriting of each member in the band. We're not really a band where, at least so far, where we're like, oh, we're not doing this song, we're not doing that song, or it doesn't fit the sound, if you want to call it that. It all lies within the realms of rock. And when somebody has a song, it might take a couple months or even years in some cases just to get around to like focusing on this song that this person told us about like a year ago. And we take that idea and then everybody just kind of brings the wonderful blufferness of it, and then we just kind of combine all the ideas or come up or throw ideas out at rehearsals until the song becomes like what it is. Sometimes it might be like, oh, I want this song to be slow, but that doesn't really sound good with the full band, so we speed it up or X, Y, and Z, and it will be like, well, it's got to have a keyboard solo, you know what I mean, or it's got to have like a wicked sax solo, or it's got to be like a harmony here, or we just kind of try all the ideas until like the ones that just don't work, and we go with the ones that do, I think.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off the idea, that's honestly my favorite part of the band is how everyone branches off on their own kind of trailblazing kind of musical journey. And again, like Jojo said, we all meet in the middle at some way. I kind of think in terms of like other bands that did similar things, I think like Queen really, if you dig deep on a lot of their albums, they hit all of the bases. Like they go from obviously their arena rock anthems that we all know, like We Are the Champions and all that stuff, but then they have like Cool Cat, which is very kind of funky and soulful and just groovy. And then they have one of my other favorite songs of theirs is Stone Cold Crazy. And that's kind of got this like thrash metal vibe to it. So yeah, like, and it's so cool, kind of how we all collaborate, because sometimes like I'm not super well educated in music theory, so I'll just come through with like a simple riff or some chords or like a story here, and then the band will just take it off on a whole kind of journey of its own. So it's a really fun experience, and there's never not something to work on. Like I feel like we never have writer's block, which is a good problem to have. It's almost like, okay, we have so many songs and now how do we, focus in on them, so it's a lot of fun.
Now, you guys, of course, I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, you guys are from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The band's based out there in Wisconsin. How's life like for, a rock and roll band out in Wisconsin? There's not a lot of bands I know that have come out of there. And how's it like out there for you guys?
I enjoyed a lot. Milwaukee scene is very cool. I look up to kind of a lot of I kind of wonder how other bands like Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Queen got those big, heavy kind of like tones. And a lot of it I think has to do with, when it's cold out, you get cooped up inside. And there's nothing to do sometimes except work on your craft, whatever it may be. It could be music, it could be writing, it could be, you know, whatever people's hobbies are. So I think in a lot of ways it can be a blessing in disguise. We all like also came out of those 2 years of the pandemic and that lockdown period. So again, a lot of songs were pumped out during that time. But the Milwaukee community is very supportive. We have over the years we've met up with a lot of other cool groups like Stone Theory. They're out of Kenosha. They're I would say another rock and roll classic rock band. We've played with other bands like Moonglow. They're a little bit more soul and funk. So it's cool because the Milwaukee scene is very versatile, very cool, and it's fun to be a part of. But then we also want to branch out. We want to, we just got done with a tour that, kind of trickled through the region of the Midwest. So we want to see everywhere. I don't think any of us would mind going to places where it's a little bigger cities and a little bit warmer, to play some shows. So it's still fun though. Milwaukee's a cool city.
Yeah, I would say that the Milwaukee scene is kind of like a melting pot, if you would, of different, sometimes vastly different musical genres. At least with how I've heard other cities, and I'm from Chicago originally. I grew up there for 18 years before coming to school here. Well, I hear it describing a lot of other cities and scenes, especially when you read like history and you just kind of look up the history of rock or blues or jazz music. A lot of the ways you hear it described back then is like, oh, there's like jazz clubs and blues clubs, the rock scene, like plays here a lot. Like there's this venue and that venue are known for primarily hosting like rock bands and stuff like that. And I think I can speak to the current day of that kind of idea in other cities. But from what I've seen in Milwaukee, because the city is fairly small, especially to me. I mean, it's like half the size of Chicago, which is a great city. That's all I'll say. The scene here in Milwaukee is awesome because, despite Milwaukee being described, at least demographically, as like a segregated city, I don't feel that way about the music scene necessarily, at least in reference to where a lot of the music happens or a lot of the shows happen. You don't really, at least I haven't really seen places that are like specifically like a lot of places. There are a few for sure, but not places that are specifically this is a blues club or this is a jazz club or stuff like that. Like you have those spots, but even in those spots, I've seen like overlap. You know what I mean? Like there's a place that recently rebranded. It was called the Jazz Estate, and they definitely had like a lot of jazz acts and stuff come through. But I've seen like more like um less jazz oriented acts. Of course, they have DJs and stuff there now. But at least on the rock and roll side of things, guitars and that kind of music, there's a huge indie presence and stuff like that, and that's really cool. And there's like not a ton of venues, as you would see in a city like Chicago, sprinkled out throughout different like far away neighborhoods from each other. Like, there's definitely a hub here for the kind of venues that people frequent. And while those venues host like lots of rock bands, they also host a lot of like independent acts, variety shows, and stuff like that, where when you go to a show and you might recognize one or two bands as being a certain genre, chances are the other two bands on that bill are going to be like pretty different. So you don't really get a lot of shows here where all four bands or all three bands or however many bands are playing in the local scene like play the same kind of music. You know what I mean? Very rarely do I go to a show where it's like, oh, there's all heavy metal bands tonight, or there's all classic rock sounding bands tonight. You get an indie band, you get a DJ somewhere in the middle of the set, you get the classic rock kind of sounding guys. I even played a show where you got a hip hop guy all at the same gig. You know what I mean? And that's a good thing, I think, because it exposes people to a variety of different types of sounds and music. And I find people that go to these shows who might not particularly think that they're into some kind of thing actually gain a sort of appreciation for it, because they're at the show, and if they stick around, they hear something new. You can't really go to shows in Milwaukee and only listen to one kind of music, at least in my experience.
Yeah, it's funny when we were going on tour, I had to drag Jojo out of his apartment kicking and screaming. He was like, "No, don't take me. I love this city so much." I'm like, "We gotta go to St. Paul, man. Come on." So it was tough. It was tough to get him out of there, but eventually we got him in the shack. He was riding shotgun in the van, and that was such a cool experience. But it was funny. Just one funny thing that I heard about Milwaukee recently is that I have some friends that are moving from Nashville up to Milwaukee. They're like, yeah, we heard there's like a underground kind of new surge of music. It's like it's gonna be the next happening thing. And I remember telling Jojo, I'm like, really? I didn't know about this, but hey, you know, maybe it is. Maybe it's like the next Seattle or the next Memphis or the next New Orleans. We'll see. You know, time will tell. Time will tell.
Now, yeah, that would be awesome. If Milwaukee would have like a new, coming of rock and roll. It'd be awesome for you guys. Now, talk to me about the name of the band, Wonderful Bluffer. I want to know how you found that name. How did you come to that name?
So that one, I guess, is on me. So it's always hard to start this story because once I get into the middle of the story, it kind of morphs every time. So my dad has been calling me Joe, my Joe, the wonderful bluffer, since I can remember. And so you remember how I said I'm from Chicago? Well, that's where I grew up. My family is actually from Western Africa. Um, and I guess this is like a tale or something that either originated there or my dad got it from somewhere there. But I think I eventually asked him about it when I was like at 16 or 17 at like a gas station. And he sort of like describes like the wonderful bluffer as like a smooth talking, kind of like, you know, like troubadour-esque, like wise guy or something like that, like the smooth talking, like rascal character, you know, who would like play shows or whatever for like the mafia or some sort of gang, and like he would always have these debts and stuff like that, and always be like just unable to pay them back, and they would kind of collect, and he would just always seem to talk his way out of the situation, so they would call him like the wonderful bluffer. I'm pretty sure that story changes every single time I tell it, but that's the gist of it. And so when the band was first formed, it's like, how do we come up with a name that doesn't sound like we're trying too hard or that's cringe or all that stuff? And I think we just spat out like a bunch of stuff, but we needed to play like a show because we got asked to play a show, and we didn't have a name yet. So it's like, okay, we need something. So I just threw that out, you know what I mean? And I didn't even like it at first. And I don't think the original members like did at first either. We're just like, all right, it's a name, and then I guess it grew on us. I think I was like the last holdout, even when people are like, this sounds really good when you like say it, wonderful bluffer, and I was like, I don't know, man, I don't know about that, but it grew, and I was like, all right, it's a cool name, and it doesn't sound like other bands' names. It got a story behind it, and I think the name doesn't like lock us into any one kind of genre, which is nice. We're not like the screaming deaf banshees where it's like these guys shouldn't be playing jazz. You know what I mean? So I guess that's kind of the story behind it.
Now, if you want to
And
each give, yeah, go ahead, Fritz.
I was gonna say, yeah, and coming in as like one of the later singers of the band, it was like the way that I think Jojo said to me first time, it was like wonderful bluffer. Like it just kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit. Like when I remember just talking to some of my friends who are in South Africa or England and hearing people say it in an accent, it's like, ooh, okay, that's actually kind of smooth. But the way that I thought about it, because I thought it was a cool name from the get-go, it's kind of like everything that Jojo was talking about, like a smooth talking guy. Like I always think of who was that? Robert Johnson, who like started the 27 Club or whatever, or like Lightning Hopkins. Like that's who I think about, just like smooth, like blues player. Or I think of like characters from, like Michael Jackson, like being a smooth criminal. So, it's like we're all kind of have our wonderful bluff of moments, like with the shades on and when you're riding around in your car or whatever. So it's kind of like an identity that I hope a lot of people can get in tune with, so yeah.
Now, if you want to each give some influences, like musical influences for, what you guys became later as a singer, and, guitars, maybe some bands or stuff that you guys were listening to growing up that shaped you as a musician today.
Oh man, it's always so strange to talk about influences because like there's definitely it's a whole bunch of people I sit around and listen to and stuff like that. But sometimes I wonder like, can you hear this in my playing kind of thing? There's definitely some people who like I look up to and try to emulate, and like, but I don't know if all their sounds necessarily comes through so much. I feel like I need to work on that a little bit, like making my influences come through my playing. But if I had to just kind of sit and talk about them for way too long, it'd be like Freddie King. I love Freddie King. That is like the man, you know what I mean? That is like, he's probably one of my favorite blues singers, if not my favorite blues singer. He just got like this roar, I don't know, when he's like singing in a very distinct like kind of guitar sound. Um, his album Getting Ready is probably like one of my favorite blues albums of all time. So he's up there. Stevie Ray Vaughan, you can't be like a blues rock listening guitar player and not talk about Stevie Ray Vaughan. Like, what a man, you know what I mean? Slash, that's somebody who I just listened to and sat around learning some Guns N' Roses songs in the early days. Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath, that guy, maybe he might be one of the biggest in terms of like riffs and stuff that I like, right? Like what a guitar tone, what an innovator, you know what I mean? And then on some other like players, I really like Joan Jett from Joan Jett and the Blackhearts and the Runaways. Really like the Runaways. So Lita Ford's in there too. Um, their album, I forget the name of it. It's their second studio album, Queens of Noise, um, is just fantastic. I'm pretty sure that's the name of the album, but that they just rip. So that's another big one. I could just go on forever. Eric Clapton, uh, Jeff Beck, um, like I can't forget about BB King and Albert King especially, and Gary Moore. I think Gary Moore is like a super underrated guitar player, man. Like especially when it comes to just how raw, but also like tasteful, his stuff is. And he was inspired by Albert King. You know what I mean? I can go on forever and ever, man. Geez, there's so many good guitar players just that have made me be like, wow, like I want to sound like those guys, or geez, I'll never sound like those guys. Randy Rhoads, Ozzy's like, Ozzy's first guitar player, Road Crow's Crazy Train and like the Blizzard of Oz and all those kind of albums. Wow. Yeah, I need to stop, right? It'll just be all right. This guy, yeah, this guy's got one song. This guy's got like two. I don't know, you know what I mean?
Hell yeah. I like all those. I agree with all those inspirations because I'd say, like, as a singer, the thing that's inspiring to me is like the musicianship and the instrumental kind of influence that people have. Like, a lot of times when it comes to any lyrics that I write for the band, people be like, well, Fritz wrote the lyrics to this song. I'm like, well, these lyrics wouldn't exist if like the band didn't come up with this idea. So it's like it's a two-way street in many ways. But yeah, I'd say for one, I am kind of new to singing. I was very self-conscious about singing as a kid. And then I got into like percussion, and I started like rapping in high school and like writing poems so that I could bring them to like freestyles. But eventually, like one day I was like, I want to sing a little bit more. And so I looked up to um people like Zach De La Rocha. Like, he's my favorite front man, just on his vocal projection, his message. Like, that guy has a lot of principles, and he has a moral compass and an ideology that he's trying to get across. And I think that's a very important thing to have. Um but again, I'll never be able to like shout and do the things that he does, because he has such diaphragm support to do all those, like, I don't know, all those beautiful screams and all those big messages that he brings across. So I always kind of try and take influences from, Freddie Mercury, Robert Plant, Eddie Vedder, Lane Staley, Ozzy Osbourne's a huge one for me. But I'm never going to be as good as them, and then they're never going to be able to do like things as good as I can do. You shoot for the stars and you learn from them, but then you at some point you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what are my strengths, as well. So yeah, I would even say like one of my big influences would be Tony Iommi, just because of his story and how, like, he lost, his two fingers in a welding accident where a press came down and took him off, and just the story of how, he was about to be a studio musician, and then his like career just flashed in front of his eyes with that accident. But out of that catastrophe came metal, and that's like probably my top favorite genre, next to like rock and grunge. And I love like reggae and other stuff like that too, and folk. But yeah, just his attitude of not quitting is like one of my favorite stories of all time. And even Ozzy Osbourne, like I like Ozzy more in Black Sabbath than in his solo stuff. But I mean, Ozzy being let go from Black Sabbath and then continuing his career. And then eventually, that's like a beautiful story where they all get back together again at the end for their 13 album or whatever it was. But yeah, so I look to singers and drummers and all types of people for inspiration and all that.
I want to go back to what Jojo was saying about, the blues. As a young guitar player for other, young guitars, do you think it's important to learn the blues? Because a lot of, young guitarists want to just go and do solos. They want to play like Eddie Van Halen right away. But you learned all the old school blues like a lot of old guitarists did. Like guitars from the '70s, like Richie Blackmore, or from the '60s, I should say, Richie Blackmore, Eric Clapton. They all learned the old '50s blues. Do you think that's important to learn all those blues classics in order to become a good guitarist?
I think there's just multiple ways to achieve like one's goals. I feel like, especially for a lot of younger kids, because I actually started out more into heavy metal than like blues stuff, but very shortly after I got into like the soul of the blues. I think you can look at it two ways, you know what I mean? First, you just got to learn what you love, like what sounds good to you and what will further your goals and what you want to do. I think that's the path you should start on, you know what I mean? Like don't learn jazz just for the sake of it, or because people tell you like this is where you should start. But I feel like, and maybe this is true for other players, like I feel like all of us come back to the blues at some point, and that can be earlier in your development or later. Because what the blues is more than just like the legendary guitar players and stuff that kind of shape the history of it. But it's like what they're saying with their guitars, and then what they're saying with the lyrics and the rhythms and the history of the blues. To me, the blues is more than just like the guitar playing and the sounds. It's like all of it's like a story because it's a story that we all like feel. You know what I mean? I think it's important to if you're a guy who starts out as like a shredster and you're like, oh man, I can shred some mad Eddie Van Halen. I think the blues teaches you like restraint, like, if I would compare shredding to like a kid who just wants to like run super fast and and prove how fast he can run and all that stuff. And then I compare the blues to be like a long distance runner, somebody who like is thinking about just how they can go how they can keep going for like a longer period of time. Like it's more intricate, it's more thought out, it's more detailed. Um, I think that's really important. And I think you have they just those early blues guys and like the you know BB King and all those dudes. They just have so much to like teach with their stories. I don't know if it was BB King or one of those guys who said like the blues ain't like it's not really sad music. It sounds sad, but it's like it's actually happy music. You know what I mean? It's music that connects people. It's music that makes you feel good. Like every day you might have the blues, but it feels good to sing it. You feel better afterwards. Like the blues ain't there to make you sad. The blues is there to make you happy. So I think a lot of players should spend some time studying the blues. You know what I mean? It teaches some good restraint and it teaches just like like getting people call the blues like a language. I've never really heard like rock music or metal music called like a language for at least as far as guitar playing goes. The blues has like there's more time to it. There's a less is more approach that I think adds to any kind of player that like adds to your ability of any kind of no matter the kind of player that you are. You can learn a lot from playing less. And I think that is probably one of the most important parts of blues guitars, like playing less but saying more, you know what I'm saying? And even myself, I'm trying to just like keep going back to that idea and keep learning as much as I can about just the rhythms, the sounds, the licks, all that stuff about blues guitar.
So I was like recording, Passion and Reason. Your first album came out October of 2021. How was the studio experience like? How was it like making that album?
Yeah, the studio experience for Passion and Reason was in our basement. We lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, this little baby blue house on Alice Street. I love that neighborhood. I miss it. Jojo and I were roommates there. That was a really fun time. That's where that was our kind of, pandemic project. It was an interesting experience. And it gave some cool sounds. So basically, I was I used to play with this group called Downer House. Our roommate Charlie Martinez, and this guy Nick Canute. We were all in a group and we played some shows. And Nick went on to be a audio engineer. And so basically, Jojo and I and the band, we wanted to start recording some music, so we got ourselves a Scarlett interface. Nick came through. We set up all the mics in the basement. We did our best to cover the walls with blankets and soundproof the whole thing. And it was really fun. It was a lot of trial and error. And I think we did a very, very, very good job for doing it ourselves. I would compare the sound quality to much of like how the songs coming out of the 70s sounded. Like I compared our album to I think like Thin Lizzy's first album. Like whatever they did in the studio sounds just as good as what we did in our basement. And Jojo actually has like a really cool story that I'll let him finish. There was he was were you recording the solo to, was it Rockford, where another mic was recording it? I'll let Jojo chime in because this is a really cool kind of happy mistake that we made.
Yeah, so I was tracking a solo for that song Rockford, that which is like the first one on that album. And um basically like I thought that the guitar or the microphone that was recording my amp was the one in front of it. And I thought that was like, the button or whatever. I'm so bad at audio technical stuff. Like I'm like, I plug in and I know amp settings and I know pedal settings, a computer, Scarlett interface, what's that? Fruity Loops, what? But basically it was the overhead like mic that was over by the drum set. That was the one I think that got like pushed to record, and we recorded this epic solo. And my girlfriend at the time was helping us do audio stuff and recording it while Nick was away for that day, and she like spliced together these 3 different takes, and that was super cool. But it kind of created this really cool, like far away, like in the distance, like reverberating sound, which I think sounds super cool. Like when you can hear it on the album or whatever, you can kind of tell that it's not like it feels like it's a little far away naturally. You know what I mean? It was like the room mic picking that up, the overhead mic, and so I think that was a pretty cool sound. It was just one of those things that just happens when you do stuff yourself. You're like, oh, mistakes are abound, but sometimes they sound pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically what happened is we recorded ourselves, and then Nick, Jojo, RJ, and I, we would do it in all these different ways where you listen to the desktop speakers, and you go listen to your headphones, and you go listen to the car, and then we would make all these touch ups. And so that was cool. But now that we're going to studios, we go to this place called Rock Garden Studios in Appleton, Wisconsin now, where we recorded our new single Napalm Showers, and we also recorded singles that are going to be coming out like Pink Dollar Bills, Love Bomb. We're going to be getting into Miscommunication and all these other newer songs that we have. It's really nice having like an audio engineer that's does it every single day. And they this guy Mark almost doesn't even give us the time to get Nick picky. He's like, the energy's there, this sounds good, let's move on, because I used to do like 30 vocal takes and like, so it's nice going into a studio and having to, paying for studio time. You're like, okay, we got to keep this ball moving, and we got to be efficient. We got to come in with like solid ideas that we're ready to lay down right now, so it's nice doing it at Rock Garden Studios. So check them out if you guys need anywhere to record.
And going back to the first record, any favorite moments? You guys, you mentioned it was a self-produced project. Talking about that, what do you think were some of the best like tracks or something that you'd say I really think this song maybe you're proud of?
It's always so tough to pick a favorite. I think one of my favorites is it's tough to pick a favorite. I think one of my favorites. One of the more standout moments for myself. There's a song on album called Grandpa's Peg Leg, which was written by our bass player Adam, and he has a pretty nasty solo on it, which is so sick. But I was going in to record that day, and I was getting all my stuff set up and all that, and I think I was just down there in the basement by myself, and I was just doing like a warm up take or something, or maybe Fritz was there. I can't remember the details, but basically, I nailed the guitar solo on that track in the first take, which was like, the day is done. You know what I mean? I can't even remember if I did like any more takes after that because it was just like it was supposed to be just a warm up, just to kind of test some ideas, and it just ended up sounding so good. And honestly, I don't think I can even play anything that sounds as good as that one live these days. I feel like I keep chasing that, and I'm like, yeah, I'd have no clue what I did, but it sounded great, good enough to be like, print, cut, it's done. I'm going back upstairs.
Yeah, I'd say my favorite part of the album was finishing it or putting it out on all the distro kit, streaming platforms. But yeah, like on that record again, I'm very much a student to the art of singing. So I was doing a lot of takes because I was learning how to hit certain notes health in a healthy way, and just trying to nail the right pitches and whatnot. So when I hit this big note for Wicked Grace, that was a good feeling because I spent a decent amount of hours trying to get it right. But right, going off with what JoJo said, Grandpa's Peg Leg is one of my favorite songs because JoJo and Adam led the way a lot on that song, but they wrote the lyrics for it. So is all that I had to do was focusing on coming up on vocalization. So that's my favorite song just because I don't know, they crushed the lyrics on it. So I really enjoyed it. But I like all the songs in different ways because it goes from like classic rock and roll, almost like Chuck Berry vibes, to blues to folk, with our song Son of Persephone. And then the crazy progressions that are on Grandpa's Peg Leg and Broken Man. So I like all the songs for different reasons.
Now, mentioning lyrics, who writes the lyrics mainly for the band? Is everybody kind of contribute with the lyrics, and where do you guys get inspiration for that?
Yeah, so like again, being one of the later singers, JoJo had and the band had a lot of songs already like written. I would make some tweaks here and there. But like on Rockford, JoJo wrote a lot of that Broken Man, so it's kind of like hybrid projects. And then some now it's turning into like one person doing writing for songs, but it's a give and take. Like sometimes someone will hit like a wall or something and then someone will chime in with an idea, so it definitely depends on the song, like JoJo wrote we were working on the song Petals on North Avenue, and that's an idea that he had and he can talk more about that. But when it comes to like a song like Napalm Showers, JoJo came up with the riff. That's a funny story. Like I'm pretty sure JoJo wrote it on a keyboard or something that he had at his house. And then you kind of listen to the song on repeat, and then I'll write a story that I tried to shrink down into some few key kind of highlighted lyrical lines, and then I'll run it past the band. I'm like, does this sound like a cool hook? And then it goes on from there. So yeah, it's a case by case kind of thing. Like everyone in the band is kind of a singer songwriter in a way. JoJo's got a good singing voice.
I do not have a good singing voice. You don't want to hear that, man. You have to cut the interview short. But yeah, with at least on the opposite spectrum is like approaches to songwriting because yeah, in the band, like it's a give and take. Julia writes songs, RJ writes songs and lyrics. I need to get back to writing more songs. I have like a million ideas in my head. I just haven't sat down to kind of flesh out. Fritz writes songs. My approach to back when I used to do a whole lot more songwriting because these days I feel like I haven't brought a song to the band in a minute that wasn't like a riff or an idea. Um, I like kind of like that Eagles like approach to it. Eagles and like people like John Prine or like lyricists. I as much as I like a lot of classic rock music and stuff like that and punk and metal, sometimes I feel like the lyrics can maybe be a little deeper than just love and And even though I love the blues, I love all the stuff the blues has to say. I find it really difficult to sit down and write just like kind of simple lyrics or things that I feel like have been like not necessarily explored before, because you can always say things in a different way. But I feel it really difficult to write um like like something that feels like it doesn't have like some sort of meaning. And I'm not saying every song has to have a meaning. I think some of the best songs just are just don't have meanings. But like I think my approach to songwriting is like um storytelling and experiences, ways of being, moods of living, invoking like imagery. And what I often do is like, because I'm not a singer, it's kind of hard to come up with melody. But as far as words go, and rhythms and stuff like that, I guess I have like a sort of grand idea in my head, and then it's like you lose about three-fourths of that when you're actually writing the music. But I like to sit down with lyrics and stuff like that, and you kind of start with some stuff that sounds like really cool, and then you kind of hit the wall. You're like, all right, I got all the cool stuff out, but how do you make it like flow and sound good? And then that way, I'll just write out in like really like I'll just write out long sentences like what I'm trying to convey with this single line of words. Like, I'll write it down in a full sentence like I'm trying to say is that the meaning of life is absolute only if you let it be, or something like that. And I'll be like, now how can you condense that into lyrics? You know what I mean? So that's kind of my approach to it. I really like just layering and wordplay and like something that'll make the audience like read it as opposed to listen to the music and be like, oh damn, like that's what you're trying to say. But all like doing that without being like ridiculously like pretentious or nothing about it. Like, these could be the best lyrics in the world to me, but they could actually just be hot garbage. You know what I mean? And I don't like to approach it as like I don't like saying stuff for the like I don't want to say like I don't like approaching is that like I'm trying to say something for the sake of saying it, or because it sounds like super otherworldly or super like poetical, or that's not a poetic, or super like, you know like high art or something like that. Like, they should kind of naturally take that form. I don't think you should write anything just for the sake of sounding smart or new or beautiful. It should just really just mean something to you. You know what I mean? Or if you're writing like a silly kind of song, like just let it be silly. Not everything needs to be ridiculously complicated. Um,
Now, how's it like been playing live for the band out there in Wisconsin? How's the live shows been? And you guys like playing live?
there you go.
Yeah, I would say that's something that we really, really, really pride ourselves on. We're figuring out, the next step with, interviews, which is why we're so excited to be on this, your show, and, radio time and streaming stuff. But we have the live performance down really pat. We had, a show at this place called the Cooperage, which is in the Water District of Milwaukee. It's right by the Lake Michigan. You can see this beautiful bridge called the Home Bridge, and it's lit up at night. And there was a snowstorm. This was at the end of January, I believe. It was the second to last show of our tour, and we were all afraid that the snow was going to discourage people, but it was a packed house. I'm pretty sure Jason, the owner there, he said that we sold like the most tickets it's out of like all the local bands. It was like the highest um audience, number of people there aside from big acts that they call in from, B list kind of bands or whatever. So yeah, that place got jumping, people had their flashlights out, waving their hands. I almost was like, is the crowd big enough to do a stage dive? But I didn't do it. I'm sure Jojo and the rest of the band was like really happy that did happen. But yeah, we like to have a good time at these live shows, whether it's like a small bar in a little bar in like Chicago, or if we're playing at a brewery in St. Charles, Illinois, we treat it like it's a Madison Square Garden, or it's like the last show that we're going to play. So we really try to go out, guns a blazing and just having a good time and getting people to loosen up. And just feel passionate and, excited about life,
Yeah, I really like live shows. I'm not like a studio guy. Like, you know what I mean? The studio is definitely cool because you can kind of control the sound and stuff like that. But I like being on a stage with like a really good mix and an audience. That's my whole thing is like just playing like new and cool stages. That's like the reason for all of this. It's like just want to go to new places and want to see, you know, how the sound is on different stages. I want to play, venues, big or small, intimate. If there's people that want to come and listen, I really just like, oh, just crushing it on guitar with a good band on stage. You know what I mean? Like just having that natural sound, and you don't think about it so much, or you kind of do, but like it prevents you from like getting too caught up in one moment. You know what I'm saying? Like if you miss a note in the solo, you just got to move on. You can't really go, but stop, guys. We gotta redo the solo. You know what I mean? And there's that kind of thing. I don't really get nervous for live shows too much anymore, which is nice. Um, it just is something that's really really fun. I like hearing like the mix coming out of the monitors. I like hanging out with the other bands and like just the people in the audience and friends. Like before, after a show, it's just really cool. That's kind of why I do a lot of things. Just this is really cool and really fun, and it makes me feel like, you know, great. Like I feel like I when I was a kid, I had this naive thing in my mind was like, oh man, people don't really start gigging until their mid 20s. I don't know why I thought that. But every person I would see in these classic rock videos looked like they were in their 30s or 40s. I was like, well, guess that's when it starts. And then my very first like live gig here in Milwaukee when I came here for college was only 18. So I was like, huh, well, I guess that wasn't true. And then after that, it was like, all right, now I got the whole world ahead of me. You know, let's play some live shows. It's just an experience. It's a whole experience, and it's different every time.
Yeah, my favorite thing is I think people forget that, the crowd again comes to hang out and comes to see the bands, but it's also fun spectating, the audience, like people having their conversations or like, if two of your friends that are kind of interested in each other start flirting and stuff like that. So it's fun. Like I'm always like watching the audience just as much as they're watching us on stage. So it's fun from both sides. And the thing that I like most about Wonderful Bluffer and having the 6 piece and so many people to solo and take the songs in different directions is we do something new every single time. Like what you hear on our records isn't going to be the same solo or necessarily the same vocal range or vocal kind of projection. We switch it up a lot and it keeps it interesting for us and it keeps it interesting for the fans that come to a lot of our shows. Like, oh, you played Goddess of War this way this time. That was really really cool. So that's another favorite thing that I like about the group is how we switch it up for each show.
Now for 2023, what are the plans for the band in terms of touring or recording? What's in store for this year?
I think so we're getting back into the studio. We got like I think we got like 3 days booked for just finishing up some recordings that were kind of put on standby while we did the little mini winter tour thing. So we're gonna get back and finish those up and get on to some new ones. Definitely trying to get on more festivals this year. Usually I miss the boat for booking for festivals for like by like a month or a month and a half. And so I've already started reaching out to festivals who don't even have like their websites updated just yet, just to kind of get on the radar. So trying to book for some festivals. Kind of at least for me, because I handle most of the booking. Um, like remember how I said Milwaukee's kind of like a bit of a small city and you kind of get a lot of overlap. One thing I'm trying to kind of get away from a little bit is just like playing too much in the hometown to kind of maximize like the turnout of people that come out when we do play. You know, trying to book some more bigger venues in the city. There's like I feel like we played at most of the big ones, and there's just a couple more I want to kind of try my luck at and see if we can get these like larger venues. That I'll be satisfied for a bit. But so trying to get some festivals both here and abroad, and looking at more venues because I had some fun luck booking out of town for the little mini tour for the winter time. So I'm like, oh gosh, like the summertime's like prime market. We went out to Minnesota and played this place called the Turf Club, which is owned by the like First Avenue, and that was just like I was surprised we booked that one because that was a big deal, and we packed the place on a Thursday night for like an out of town band with like local support, and I was like, well, if we can do that, I need to hit up some cool venues out of town because like I like doing new stages. So yeah, summer festivals, recording new stages for myself, practicing as much as I can.
Now, any live shows that you want to promote for maybe some dates that are already confirmed? Maybe you want to promote here for the show.
Yeah, so let's see. We have a show coming up at this it's like a DIY venue called the Washroom here in Milwaukee, which has been getting a whole lot of buzz. So it's kind of nice and they asked us to play. That's coming up March 4th, which is going to be fun. And then we have a show at the end of April. I do believe it is April 28th, which is a Friday, um, at the Cooperage. They invited us back right away. We played there a few times, but since this last show we did, like almost, if it wasn't for the snowstorm, would have sold out. Like Jason, the booking guy, like immediately wanted a similar lineup. To see if we could sell the place out or just have another really big show. So that's coming up April 28th. We just booked Cactus Club on July 13th. And Cactus Club is one of the most popular venues here in the city. We played there a few times. We're playing with some people from out of Chicago, along with Moonglow, which is a local band, and who they just always pack the house. So that's gonna be just a fantastic show. Probably gonna, I'm betting on that one selling out just because that's a great lineup. So that's what we've got coming up so far. I'm still in the process of booking as much as I can, sending out emails and stuff. But those are the big three shows that are coming up so far.
All right. I want to thank you guys for coming on the show today. It was great talking to you.
Thanks so
Thanks for
much for
having us,
having us,
Mike.
Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Take care. Peace.